What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another episode of Bleeding BnG, a special episode. But before we get too deep into this episode, you already know what I'm going to say. Be sure to comment, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe. On the road to 2,000 subscribers, and I can't do it without you guys. But now that that's out of the way, I said this is a special episode, and you know I've been saying at the start of a lot of my latest episodes that football season is here. Football season is here. And it wouldn't be football season if we didn't keep an eye on our rivals up north in the Philadelphia Eagles. So to do that today, I got my man. I just told him before the show. It feels like an annual episode. My man, Mr. Crockpot from the Party on Broad podcast. How are you doing, my guy?
Yo, man, like you said, it's like an annual thing now. Uh, Football getting ready to go. We're both kind of in the education system. This is the thing, but what's better, man? There's not a lot's better than football season right around the corner. There's a lot of excitement in Philadelphia. We'll get into it. But thanks for having me on.
I feel that. I feel that. And yeah, let's get into it. So before we look ahead to the 2024 season, let's look back. I know you might not want to do it, but let's look back at the 2023 season. And I just want to know, because you're one of the most educated Philadelphia Eagle fans I know. What do you think was the cause to the epic collapse that you guys had last season? Starting off the season 10-1, then ultimately losing six of the last seven, including the playoffs, with a playoff blowout loss. You guys started off like gangbusters. What do you think was the biggest reason for that fall off towards the end of the season?
I hate to go political, man, but it's really just a true hot mess of everything. The Eagles owner failed, the general manager failed, years of neglecting key positions in the draft, years of catching lightning in a bottle with free agency, like
Mhm.
short-term fixes with old vets. It really caught him in the ass last year. And you look at Nick Sirianni, he failed. You look at the coaching staff, they failed top to bottom. The players failed. Jaylen Hertz was clearly hurt. The his decision making on the football field really plummeted. The offense was literally nothing but vertical routes, going away from all the things that really made them elite in 2022. They abandoned the middle of the football field. They abandoned the run game for entire halves at points, to the point, dude, where like DeAndre Swift would have like two carries and we would just be screaming at halftime. And there was just a trickle down effect from top to bottom, whether that's the defensive coordinators and how much that was a true disaster. Jalen Hurts somewhat regressing as a passer inside the pocket, holding the ball too long, escaping clean pockets. The Eagles never had an answer for the blitz. There was a major issues with accountability top to bottom. So sorry, man. It was just a mix of everything, a lack of accountability from top to bottom.
Oh, trust me, I get it. And touching on that run game point, as a fantasy football owner of DeAndre Swift, I know
Oh
you're preaching
no.
to the choir. I felt like a genius the first 2 weeks. I felt like I was going to run away with the league, and then he ended
Jeez.
up on the side of a milk carton after the second half of the season. And I know that all wasn't his doing, but like you said, there were games where he would get halves where he would go getting one carry and two carries, and I felt like the stupidest owner in the world putting him in the lineup. So you had touched on him earlier. How hot is Nick Sirianni's seat going into 2024? He seemed like America's darling after the 2022 season, but it seems like, and you know how you guys as fans are up there, it seems like it's a lot of pressure on him going into this season.
Flaming hot, man. Flaming, like, to be honest, like I was surprised he was brought back. That was a huge discussion point this offseason. There's a lot of question marks about what Nick Sirianni really does in the front office. He's supposed to be this offensive-minded guru, a leader in that front office, which, let's face it, he's not. And I think you look at this team this offseason, the keys have been handed to Kellen Moore on offense. Personally, I hate the idea of a head coach that doesn't really have a stake, doesn't really have ownership on either the offense or defensive side of the football. I think Nick Sirianni is a likable dude. I still think the Eagles players respect him for the most part. My question is like, what happens when the shit hits the fan this season? What happens when the Eagles meet adversity through the ebbs and flows of a football season. And I think it's so important for the Eagles in 2024 to hit the ground running quite literally, get a few wins from the jump, because we know the media, especially the Philly media, the cameras are all going to be circling Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni and that relationship, whether it's a timeout, whether that's coming back off of a 2 minute warning, whether it's after a three and out, like the media here are crazy, man. They're going to be swarming. I think if they come out slow out the gate, Nick Sirianni, his head's going to roll, and it's going to be fascinating to watch.
I get it because whenever I think of Nick Sirianni, I don't know if you've seen this video, but there was a video after the or during the overtime game that we had inside the NFL. He was mic'd up and he was walking down to the sideline to kind of call a fake timeout before our field goal. And I was like, oh, this guy really is full of himself. Like he really thinks the world of himself. And I thought that, if you guys didn't have such success, I know how you guys are in Philly. It looks like that you guys were going to be, hammering down, and his personality wouldn't be as lovable as it was in 2022. So speaking to a similar, storyline and a similar theme, you actually touched on it a little bit, but do you think the league has figured out Jalen Hurts? I know that you talked about his regression as a passer. I know that he was dealing with that lower leg injury last year, but
Exactly.
from him going from an MVP finalist to 23 touchdown to 15 interception passing ratio last year. I know he still got his rushing touchdowns. Do you think the league has figured him out a little bit?
It's a great question, dude. That is the question I mean, this is such a huge year for Jalen Hurts.
Mhm.
I'm kind of in that middle area. A lot of people still think he could be the MVP of 2024, but for me personally, he's got a lot to prove. You nailed it on adjusting to the blitz. That is a huge thing that we saw the Eagles fail to adjust to week after week after week. And that's the problem I have with like Nick Sirianni, like going back to him. Like if he's supposed to be the head coach of this team and game plan a problem, halfway through the season, and he's not the guy that's doing it, it's actually kind of more than what the hell is he doing other than being a cheerleader? So for me, I'm still a believer in Jalen Hurts. I think it was a really bad situation, top to bottom. Again, the entire offense was strictly vertical routes, no checkdowns, way too much hero ball, going to the sidelines, just a ton of um, uh, I guess they were dead last in motion, and they just a lack of creativity. And going away from the RPOs, I think defenses didn't fear Jalen Hurts with the run. There was a lot less design runs. I mean, it was just a hot mess from top to bottom. So they abandoned the middle of the field with Dallas Goedert. I mean, he was out there. He did get hurt again, but they never targeted him. So it was just just again a hot mess. I
Mhm.
think he can get back to the Jalen Hurts we saw in 2022, getting the ball out faster, getting back to those slants, the curl routes, the comebacks, the bubble screens, and we'll see. But I need to see it to believe it.
For sure. And down here in Washington, the hope is high with our new presumed to be franchise quarterback in Jaden Daniels. And it seems
Yeah,
like our new GM, Adam Peters, has brought in like a conglomerate of like quarterback gurus to kind of assist him in his development or accelerate that development, whether it be Tavita Pritchard, Cliff Kingsbury, but we've even got you guys as offensive coordinator from last year and Brian Johnson. Is Brian Johnson as bad as Eagle fans make him out
no,
to be, or is he just a scapegoat?
no. He was the scapegoat, man, without a doubt. And that was a big part of the whole Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni thing. And I remember slamming the table about this issue during our post-game shows, during our regular shows, during last year's season, man. A lot of people were unfair with Brian Johnson, especially when things were rough. And I, I said it from the jump. The bones of last year's offense was Nick Sirianni's uh, scheme. So I don't think he ever had full control over what was happening. So I agree, man. We'll see what he does in Washington. I think you guys are kind of trending in the right way. I think a Dallas Cowboys team is going down and you're kind of going up in that like 8-9 win range. That's just me. And I think you guys crushed the draft. You got a couple players that I was really high on, like Mike Sammer still, but um we'll see. Yeah.
No, for sure. And I was actually telling a couple of people that listen to my podcast, I think that Brian Johnson's going to have a bigger influence than what his title leads on. I think he's a senior offensive assistant in name, but if you look at some of the runs that Jaden has had during training camp practices and things like that, that looks like Jaylen Hertz of like 2022. And I feel like he has a big say in like a lot of that quarterback run scheme and things of that nature. So let's look at the Commanders. We have one of you guys' or what I believe to be reading articles and things of that nature. He was a fan favorite up there in tight end Zach Ertz. He's almost a Philly legend with what he did in the Super Bowl. How you feel about Zach Ertz being a Commander in 2024?
I really don't care, man. I'm sorry, but like as an Eagles fan, it seems like you can't help but feel that Washington is the place where careers go to die. It's
Oh,
just,
trust me, I get it. Trust me, I get it.
I mean, you look at the laundry list of guys like Donovan McNabb, James Thrash, Deshaun Jackson, Carson Wentz. I guess it's now Zach Ertz's turn.
Yeah.
For real though, like Zach Ertz is just the best. He's a Eagles legend. Kudos for him for getting 5 million. I have no issues. I have no qualms with Zach Ertz chasing that money. That catch he had in the Super Bowl was all time, all time.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like you when we brought him in during free agency. I'm like, all right, we're chasing the ghost of Zach Ertz. He's not what he was, but I will say, and I'm not trying to hype him up to the Philly fans that might be watching, he is looking rather spry. I didn't think that he had anything left, but it seems as if Jaden Daniels was like the quickest to build a rapport with him. And to hear like Jaden Daniels wasn't good working over the middle of the field, I think that Zach Ertz is going to make that a lot easier for him. So let's look at you guys' roster. You guys had a lot of departures, but you guys had a lot of additions, losing guys like Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey, but bringing in a guy like Saquon Barkley. Do you guys think that you guys brought in enough to supplement what you guys lost? Because you lost a lot in the trenches. The one reason why I always thought that Philly was always going to be competitive is with the groundwork that you guys did in the trenches. You
For
guys
sure.
arguably had top five O lines and D lines for the last couple of years. I don't know if the additions that you brought in, while you have a dynamic back in Saquon, do you guys feel like you guys did enough in the offseason?
I mean, real quick in the trenches, we're pretty confident about Cam Jurgens replacing Jason Kelsey. We're not worried from like a talent standpoint, from like a physical standpoint. He was drafted to be his replacement. There are concerns about whether or not he can like mentally handle it. If I'm an opposing defense, I'm attacking the middle of that offensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles. You also have an issue at right guard. Mekhi Becton will be the starting right guard for the Eagles. He's just a massive human being, very different than Cam Jurgens, who's smaller, but an elite athlete in his own right. On the defensive side of the line, there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of guys that really need to step up with more snaps. I'm talking Nolan Smith. I'm talking Bryce Huff, guys that are going to get a lot of snaps this year and are expected to be major players in 2024. But Saquon was the kind of main guy this offseason. He's the first Eagles running back in a long time that can be featured in any down. And we could go on and on about why Saquon is a good back for the Eagles, but the biggest thing I think for the Philadelphia Eagles is that he's a third down weapon. The Eagles got into way too many third and longs last season. It was just a hot mess. And I think that's where Saquon and his gravity on offense, on early downs, in the RPOs, in motion, going into the slot, the wheel routes, and on third down, man, this is a guy that had 4 touchdowns in 2023, 2 rushing, 2 receiving, tied with Kyron Williams for tops among running backs last year. And you look at Kellen Moore's history with guys like this. I think Saquon could have a huge year in a big way. That doesn't even mention how good he is in pass protection. And Jalen Hurts really struggled against the blitz, 62.3 passer rating when facing 5 or more rushers. That ranked 25th among quarterbacks the final 6 weeks of the year. So not only is Saquon going to be RB1 for the Eagles, but he's most likely going to be wide receiver 3 and get a ton of targets, whether that's the check downs, the wheel routes, the RPOs, the bubble routes, and so forth. That's the positive light. The other side of that is I'm scared, man. Like you look at the injury history, we can't ignore it. He plays a position that sees players kind of hit a wall. During this time of his career, he has been able to play 30 of the last 34 games the last 2 years, but he's got a lot of touches. He's entering year 7, and the Eagles don't have a lot of depth at that position. So if he's like gonna miss some time, that could be a major issue for the Eagles.
Yeah, it's crazy that you say that. I was hearing somebody, I forgot who it was, but they were mentioning Saquon and they were like talking about the production that he'll have this season. It was like if the Eagles can give him the type of runway with, the offensive line that they have, because they're like, at this point in his career, Saquon's not the type of make you miss in the backfield type of guy. But that's what he was when he was coming out 6 years ago. I know
Yeah.
running backs age like dog years, but if we can remember him at Penn State, he was the guy to make you miss at a phone book. That's what made him the number 2 overall pick
Yeah.
coming out of the draft. So it's interesting to hear you say some of the same things. But let's talk about some of the things that you're hearing out of training camp that you didn't expect in the going into the 2024 season. So give you an example over here on the Washington, and it seems as if Jahan Dotson is fighting for his life.
What
Not
is
as,
that?
not
What
on the
is that?
roster, not on the roster, but on the depth chart. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but I saw this coming a couple of weeks ago when I was out there in training
Wow.
camp. Olamide Zaccheaus was out there getting a lot of reps with the ones before him. And I know
Wow.
he played with you guys last year and he played a lot of special teams. He didn't see the field a lot. Was he you guys' wide receiver 3 last year?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so he's been out there running with the ones a lot, and I noticed that a couple of weeks before the preseason. And then when you see Jahan Dotson out there playing in the third quarter of week 1, it's just something to raise your eyelids. And then they asked, Dan Quinn about it, and he was transparent and honest. He was like, "Yeah, we're having a battle there," and that's just something I didn't necessarily see going into training camp. So, what are some surprises, some players, some storylines that have caught you off guard coming out of Eagles training camp in 2024?
Yeah. I'm gonna go with it's got to be the Eagles linebackers, and they've been putting together some really good weeks lately. I wasn't high on the group whatsoever. This is a group that's been picked apart the last several years, every single week. And you look at Devin White, Zach Bond, Nakobe Dean, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. coming into training camp. I still thought they were a bottom tier league in the NFL. The Eagles really needed them to grow fast and develop fast and pick up the playbook fast, and they have. They've had all of those guys have had their moments during whether that's training camp or the preseason games or the joint practices. We talk about Nakobe Dean. There's a guy that Eagles fans absolutely are head over heels about. Hasn't really delivered on that promise. Still a question mark when it comes to dropping back into coverage, but he's been all over the place lately, especially in the last preseason game and the joint practices. He's been running with the ones. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., coming like I wasn't the biggest fan. Obviously, I'm a huge Jeremiah Trotter fan from the 90s, but he as a prospect, I wasn't that high on. I thought he was a great story. He's looked terrific, man. He's probably by far the most instinctual linebacker. He's looked really good, filling holes, defending the run, and he's actually outperformed all expectations. I don't think anybody expected him to be on the field as much as he has been. I mean, there's real projection that he could be one of the starters by the end of the season. So I don't think it's an elite group by any means, but the fact that we're sitting here and saying, hey, this might not be a liability in 2024, that's the biggest surprise for me.
And this is off topic a little bit. What's going on with Jordan Davis? I just feel like he hasn't lived up to the hype that he had coming out as a prospect. Now, I wasn't necessarily the highest on him as a prospect,
Yeah.
but he was, if we can remember his last year at Georgia, he was in Heisman conversations at the beginning of the season. So what's his prospects looking like for the 2024 season?
That's a very sensitive topic for me.
Mhm.
Um, there's two sides of the coin. On the one side of the coin, drafting Jordan Davis was always a mistake for the Philadelphia Eagles, especially for me. I was a big Kyle Hamilton guy. He was number 1 on my draft board at the time when the Eagles needed a safety. just a hybrid modern safety that I was falling in love with. And they drafted Jordan Davis, who was a major Eagles target at the time. He was a first round prospect, but it was just a mistake. And now you see Hamilton flying all over the place for the Ravens. Um,
Trust me. We feel the same way with Jahan Dotson and Cal Hamilton. He was right there for the board, and we traded down. Trust me, we feel
It,
the
it,
same
it hurts. It
way.
hurts. It's a big It was a big mistake, and I'll always look at it like that in that lens. So there's a lot of criticism with Jordan Davis. As a first round pick, he was never going to be a 3 down starter in the NFL. I called that from the jump. I think he's still a very good run defender as a nose tackle for the Eagles, and I think this is a huge year for him for obvious reasons. But I think people have kind of tempered expectations.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, his conditioning is has been the storyline since OTAs. They've been just raving about how he's in the best shape of his life. We'll see. I mean, you look at last year, whether that was Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis, they hit the wall, man. Their performance the first half of the season versus the second half of the season just night and day. And I think we're a little, as Eagles fans, unfair when it comes to criticism of Jordan Davis. I don't expect him to ever be an elite pass rusher or a Jalen Carter-esque type of prospect. I think Jalen Carter is an all-pro level defender if he can be motivated enough by Vic Fangio. But Jordan Davis, he's a run defender. He's a 1 to 2 down run defender, and that's what he is.
For sure, for sure. And you touched on some players when you were mentioning the linebackers earlier. Is there a player that us as Washington Commander fans might not know now that we'll definitely know by the end of the season in terms of, having a breakout season?
I mean, it's got to be on defense for the Eagles. There's way more kind of concerns about the Eagles defense than there is on offense. So I'll give you two for the defense. Number one is Nolan Smith, an edge rusher, linebacker kind of dude for the Birds. They need Nolan Smith to have a breakout year this season. He's had 2 sacks through 2 preseason games. I mean, he hasn't looked perfect. One of those sacks, he wasn't even touched. He just kind of ran. But he was really misused in 2023. He didn't get out on the football field a lot, whether Sean Desai or Matt Patricia. Like, they didn't really utilize his athleticism whatsoever. They used him as pretty much a straight up edge rusher. So far through training camp and preseason, it's been really refreshing to see Vic Fangio and how he utilizes his linebackers. He's been blitzing a lot. He's been really kind of testing the waters to kind of see who are his best linebackers for the Eagles. The Eagles linebacker group is kind of a lot of the same kind of dudes. Like, they're kind of undersized, athletic, speedy guys. And whether it's Zach Bond or Nolan Smith. And so for me, I think Nolan Smith becoming the pass rusher we all hope he could be, it has to happen if the Eagles have any intentions of making some serious noise. I don't know how much of a believer I am in Bryce Huff. He had a really good week last week. He's basically been non-existent. So Nolan Smith is a guy that's going to get snaps, and they're expecting him to take another step. The other guy I think you should know about is Milton Williams, a defensive tackle. Looked really good when he got out there. Again, didn't play a lot, limited snaps, but 36 pressures over the last 2 years. He's the next guy up with Fletcher Cox retiring. He's without a doubt their breakout star on defense. He's a guy that can play inside, can play outside. Vic Fangio likes to kind of throw his guys all over the defensive line. And Milton Williams, I'm really kind of pissed that Howie Roseman didn't extend him this offseason. He's in a contract year. He's probably going to outperform his price tag for the Eagles this season. So Milton Williams is a guy that I think is going to be DT3 with the Eagles, and how much they rotate their defensive linemen with the snaps he's going to be getting could make some serious noise.
I heard that name. He had a strong camp last year, didn't he?
Yeah, he's really good, man. He
Yeah,
didn't get a chance.
I've heard that name. All right, a couple quick hitters. Before we get you out of here, like I said, I appreciate you doing this episode, man. So three quick hitters. So the first one is, what is more likely? You guys got a couple of dogs out there in the wide receiver position, in AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Both of them getting the bag over the course of the last couple of years. So what's more likely? AJ Brown be a first team All Pro member, or Devontae Smith make the Pro Bowl?
Jesus, that's a good question. I mean, Devontae Smith is going to be heavily utilized in this Eagles offense. Orbit motion, bubble screens, like he is going to be their primary guy that's going to be in motion all the time. Um, with like a Johnny Wilson, a guy that is a very good run blocker. I'll go Devontae Smith.
Okay. All right. For all my fantasy football fans out there, who should I be drafting? Which Eagles should I be drafting if I want to win my league this year?
I would love to say Saquon, but like I still feel like they're going to be light on his touches, especially. I mean, that's just the MO for the Eagles. I still think they're going to be a little heavier run offense than last year, but it's not going to be anything like um, yeah, geez, I would definitely draft AJ Brown.
Mhm.
They're gonna manufacture touches for him. This is gonna be an offense that utilizes the run to set up the pass downfield. It's got to be AJ Brown. I mean, he's been lights out during training camp. I mean, AJ Brown is easily wide receiver one.
Is everything good between him and Jalen? I was watching Devin
That's
White's episode
fine.
on the pivot, and
Don't,
he was kind of
don't
acknowledging that there was something there. I always thought it was hyped up, but to hear him say like, "Yeah, there was something there," it was kind of interesting to hear.
It's the media, man. There's a lot of nonsense out there. People trying to make up stories. Those two are cool, man. There's anyway, like especially when you look back at that ESPN article that dropped like 2 weeks ago
Mhm.
between Jalen Hertz and Nick Sirianni. Like, I don't know. I feel like people just need to get attention, and it's just noise.
I
Like,
feel that. I feel
uh,
that. And last but not least, give me a record prediction and tell me why the Eagles will win the NFC East in 2024. Because I know you're not going to tell me anybody else.
I'll say I'm between like 10 and 11 wins. I think this is going to be a very up and down season. There's going to be a lot of players on this Eagles defense that really need to have breakout years and step up their game in a big way, whether that's in the secondary or on the defensive line. I'll say the Eagles win. I'll go Eagles win 11 games because Jalen Hurts stayed healthy and the Eagles offensive line doesn't skip a beat with Jason Kelsey retiring.
For sure, for sure. And you heard it here first. So hopefully, guys, after this episode, you guys are a little bit more up on the Philadelphia Eagles, a little bit more educated on the Philadelphia Eagles. As always, shout out to my guy, Mr. Crockpot from the Party on Broad podcast. I'll be sure to tag and link his channel to the description. And yeah, any last words before we head on out, man?
No, thanks for having me on, man. I know we're an Eagles show, but we heavily cover the college football season and the NFL draft. So even if you're not an Eagles fan, come check us out. We do two shows on the NFL draft and college football every single week, deep diving into matchups, games of the week, draft targets to watch, all that kind of fun stuff. So thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, check that out. Remember last time we were on here, we were talking about Joel Embiid. So he's well versed in all sports. So go ahead and check
Yeah,
that out. I appreciate you, man, and I'll be checking in on you guys. We got to do this again. Hopefully, when we link up in the during the season, I'll get you back on.
absolutely.
For sure. I appreciate it, man.
Anytime, man.
All
Thanks
right,
for
peace.
having me.